Our set is a bit broader, a bit beefier than it might normally be at the desk here. Anthony Herron alongside the aforementioned Jake Butt for Big Ten today. We've got so much to get into spring football-wise. There will be 6 teams in action in the Big Ten throughout the course of the weekend in different forms, different fashions. Sammy Netling will be here to talk some softball later as well. And the head man of the Gophers, PJ Fleck, will be live with us in just a few short minutes. And Jake, we're kind of at that point in the calendar, mid to late April. There's a lot of spring football happening. The NFL draft is just a few days away. So it kind of feels like football is now more than ever year-round.
Well, for us football junkies, it's always been year-round, right? Yeah. But these spring games are, for everything you just mentioned, and like new coaches, right? Transfer portal means new players, new coordinators across the conference. And the spring games are our first chance to get a look at some of these new pieces for each team and preview what we might expect to see in the fall.
Well, we are looking forward to previewing all of those things, so we will do that here because we have a full slate of action on the Big Ten Network. Saturday, full of spring football. It begins at noon Eastern with live coverage of the Minnesota spring game. Then Matt Rule leads the Huskers onto the field in Lincoln for Nebraska's red-white spring game, followed by Luke Fickell's Badgers in action in Madison. It's all Saturday, only on Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. So let's begin with the Gophers since they lead off our coverage on Saturday, Jake, because Minnesota is a program, they are a team where we know PJ Fleck has established his culture. We've seen some really exceptional talent, though, that's had to leave the program here in recent years. Let's start off just talking about what they've lost at quarterback, because Tanner Morgan, he wasn't this guy who came in as a heralded recruit and immediately became a big starter for them with high expectations, but he won so much and made so many plays. When you look at a program having to replace that behind center at a key spot like QB, what do you think it ends up meaning for the Gophers offensively?
Well, Tanner Morgan was just as steady as they come, right? Just constantly doing his job, a guy that you trust under center. But when I look at Callie McManus, the guy that's next in line, I think there's a little bit more upside. He's one of the more highly touted quarterback recruits Minnesota has had come through the program. So I know they're excited about that. But when I look at this Minnesota offense and the Minnesota team in general, they're losing a lot of pieces, so it can't depend on just one guy or one position. Tanner Morgan benefited from having Mo Ibrahim. Right. Well, Mo Ibrahim's not going to be there this year, so as much as they're going to need Callie McManus to step up, it's the pieces around him as well.
And the mobility of Ethan Callie McManus seems like something in a handful of starts last year that's been on display for them. And so I do wonder, with a new play caller on offense then, where we've seen Kirk Shiraka, he's moved on, opportunity at Rutgers for him, and so right now it's the co-OC title, Matt Simon, Greg Harbaugh Jr. Not completely sure yet. I'll get a chance to ask PJ Fleck about that in a few minutes, but whomever ends up being the play caller, how difficult can that be when you're transitioning to a new play caller and you've got new guys in there at key positions?
It can be difficult or it can be beneficial, and it just depends on your vision for the offense. If you want to have a quarterback that has that running element, maybe getting into read options, maybe that's how you make up for some of the production lost by Mo Ibrahim last year. So it really will depend on their full vision for the offense. One thing I'm looking at it as I think one of their best offensive playmakers is going to be the tight end Brevin Spanford.
Yeah.
And Greg Harbaugh Jr. is now the co-OC, whatever that means. I'll let you figure that out. As I look at this, I say Brevin Spanford should be a guy that has 50 catches by the end of the season next year. He could have left for the NFL this year. So for Callie McManus, as he's now the solidified starter, who's a big target to throw to? It's going to be the big tight end, Brevin Spanford.
And a lot of reps being split throughout spring ball. And so we'll see Cole Kramer, rotating through at quarterback as well with Ethan Callie McManus. But, he's the guy who had starting experience last year. So I think it's a reasonable expectation that he's the front runner at that position. You've mentioned Mo Ibrahim a couple of times here. The productivity is one thing, but I would imagine, and you've played in so many offenses around great running backs, is there a comfort, a confidence that losing a guy like Mo Ibrahim, is that something that needs to be replaced kind of intangibly for their offense too?
Well, he was just such a great back. He didn't get the respect he deserved last fall, right? Because the way he produced on a week-in, week-out basis. So you don't just replace that guy one-to-one. You might need a group effort. And Callie McManus, he's going to have to pick it up with his feet from the quarterback position. But two guys that I'm looking out for, Zach Evans last year was an early enrollee running back, that his name was consistently mentioned as a guy that was producing. Well, now he's a sophomore, a year older, a year wiser. I expect him to step up. And then, of course, in the world of the transfer portal, another guy to watch out for is Sean Tyler, who came over from Western Michigan.
Yeah.
How about this production? Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, so he's clearly done it. He was a second-team all-conference player, number of touchdowns, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So you lose Mo Ibrahim, you don't have another one in line. All three of those guys I just mentioned will have to step up.
Now, defensively, we've seen where Joe Rossi has been. He wasn't a guy, he had to take over as defensive coordinator in the midst of a season when he first got the gig a few seasons back. And now there will be a co-defensive coordinator as well, as they brought in Nick Monroe from Syracuse. But Joe Rossi will be the defensive play caller for Minnesota. I do wonder, that side of the football where there's some talent to replace over there as well. It was great for them to see Tyler Nubin decide not to go to the National Football League when he could have. But the Gophers defense, I don't know that I don't get the feeling they're as easily plug and play as what the Minnesota offense, just knowing the identity that was established there. Do you think that's worthy of concern defensively?
I wouldn't use the word concern, only because I just think Joe Rossi is such a great coordinator. And I think when you can get 11 guys to play unit defense, then you can make up for maybe some of the star power that you're losing on to the next level. So Terrell Smith is gone. Tyler Nubin's back. That's great. They also lose Thomas Rush and Mariano Sori-Marin. So those are leaders across, veteran guys across their defense. So the leadership's going to be a big piece of this as well. That's where, as a defensive coordinator and a coach, Joe Rossi's taking this spring, taking some of these new pieces, saying, here's my vision for what you guys are going to need to do for us to have a successful fall. And I'm betting on him because he's just had continued success. That is defensive coordinator Joe Rossi.
I think that makes a lot of sense here. And you and I both went through coaching changes in our time in college. You did so at Michigan, I did in Iowa City. Nebraska as a program going through that as well. So Matt Rule takes over Nebraska football, brings in himself, brings in new coordinators, brings in some new talent to the roster as well. So they're in a transition phase at the moment. I'm not completely clear yet what I feel like expectations should be for Nebraska in year one, because they were close for a couple of years in a row with Scott Frost, couldn't get over the hump, and now there's some turnover with the roster there. How do you see the position that Matt Rule takes over here?
Well, you're exactly. I'm unsure too, just because of all these new pieces, and also the fact that Nebraska, it's like, hey, you weren't that far off. Right. How many games did you lose that you were right in it? One of the worst records in recent history in one-score games. So as bad as that is, you can also say the positive. You're not that far off. Matt Rule also has a history of taking underperforming programs and getting them back into the win column. He did it at Baylor. He did it at Temple. As I look at their schedule, I think we're going to find out a lot about them, because they opened the season at Minnesota and then back playing their historic rival, Colorado, which we'll have cameras all over the place with Deion Sanders. So at this point, we're just trying to put the pieces together in the puzzle to make an educated guess. We'll get the chance to watch them play this weekend, but we'll find out a lot about that team week 1, week 2.
And unfortunately for Matt Rule, for Marcus Satterfield, they're kind of banged up at quarterback right now, where Casey Thompson made a good amount of plays last year, especially in the deep game, being able to throw the ball downtown to Trey Palmer. So not only do you not have your big play receiver returning, you have some uncertainty at quarterback as well. You get Sims, who transfers in from Georgia Tech. How difficult do you think that can be to manage in the first spring that Matt Rule will have on the field, and having that uncertainty at quarterback with new people transferring in and the pre-existing talent not really being on the field consistently?
It's a great question, Anthony. Difficulty isn't the word I'd use, right? And this is something I wanted to touch on with the coaching change. It's uncomfortable for Casey Thompson because he played good at times last year. He showed some great things. Jeff Sims, like you were a starter as well. Now you're coming in. It's uncomfortable to have to compete for this job. There's no one in the program that should be comfortable because of the record and the way they performed. Some of that uncomfortability can force you to elevate your game. That competition brings out the best in everyone. And I don't think this is a scenario, they say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I think this is a scenario where they have 2 guys that are capable of leading this team to some wins. And they're going to have to elevate their game on an individual basis to prove that they should be the starter for this team. And I think as a whole, that'll benefit the offense.
You were talking about Brevin Spanford for Minnesota. Eric Gilbert transfers in. He's had a couple of different stops in the Southeastern Conference, but he was one of the top tight end recruits in the country. You know what that's like. And he's someone who has all the physical potential in the world. Is tight end the type of spot where if you have a quarterback who's not in rhythm with some of maybe the deeper passes that may happen on the outside, could you see whomever is the starter at QB have that comfort that they'll have being able to throw to the tight end position?
Well, tight ends are always open. So if you're thinking, just give it to the tight ends. I promise I'm not biased on that at all. Gilbert, though, it's uncertain at this point whether or not he's going to play because he's had a number of transfers. This isn't the first time he's transferred, so we'll see. But he is a former, I think he was a #1 high school recruit. Right. Here's another guy, though, Thomas Fedoni.
Yeah.
I remember at Michigan they were pushing for him really hard. You know, he wanted by every school in the country. He was not just a top-ranked tight end. He was one of the best players in all of college football. He's been beat up and a 5-star guy that they were excited about. He just hasn't been healthy enough to show it on the field. He's healthy this spring. He's got the respect of his teammates. He's making plays. He's ready to put those injuries behind him and go out there and prove why he was so highly rated in high school. So whoever is the quarterback, it'd be great if they have both guys on the field. But either way, I think tight end is going to be a big position for this Nebraska offense.
One thing that's kind of caught me off guard a little bit, I've been surprised that as a defensive lineman by trade, I don't mind it so much, but there have been multiple scrimmages, and it will happen again Saturday, where Matt Rule has allowed the quarterbacks to be live. I mean, we see a lot of teams that aren't even doing full live 11 on 11, let alone the quarterbacks being live. I've been surprised by that approach from Matt Rule. It can certainly be beneficial, but you do take a certain amount of risk when you're going to do that and have those guys who are normally in an opposite colored jersey, so you know you don't touch them. Guys like me barely breathe on them. Live QBs, what's your sense? What's your take on that?
Well, Matt Rule said he thinks that QBs play better when it's a live tempo. And I guess that depends on the offensive line, right? I'll play better if I got a clean pocket, but if I'm getting hit all the time. So, but what he's really trying to hit at to me is I think the offensive line was a big piece of the team's struggles. You know, Nebraska's historically done good in the trenches. They've been able to recruit and develop offensive linemen. So when you go into a live period, you're saying, guys, we're going to take the guesswork out of it. You know, as a defensive lineman, you tag off on the hip. Is it or is it not a sack? Well, you take the guesswork out of it if the quarterback's being brought down to the ground. And it puts that extra pressure and competition on those offensive linemen. Hey, man, we know very clearly if you did or did not do your job. And again, just creating some uncomfortability across this program, emphasizing the point that what has been done in the past 2 or 3 years is not good enough. It is not the direction and the vision Matt Rule has for this program going forward. So I like the fact that he's putting these guys in uncomfortable situations because they have bigger goals than just to make a bowl game.
And a level of discomfort may have been there in Madison, not because Luke Fickell got hired, but then Badgers fans had to get accustomed to the thought that, you know what, he hired Phil Longo. Wisconsin seems like they're going to spread it out, air it out in a way that we have never seen the Badgers do before. And I think that just making headlines in its own right is really intriguing. But what will it look like? How quickly do you think Wisconsin football can transition out of this sort of just power running, volume running attack that we've all historically seen?
Well, it's just think about where we are in college football. How quickly, well, in a decade ago, it may have taken some time to rebuild the programs. But today we live in the world of NIL and transfer portal. So how quickly? Well, they went out and they created depth at the quarterback position. They've brought in some guys in the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. They're deep across the offensive line. Braylon Allen's obviously back. So they have the pieces in place. And then you have a coach that comes from the Mike Leach background. So Phil Longo knows the air raid offense. Yeah. That being said, he's not afraid to run the ball, just talking to Luke Fickell. So they're not just going to go out there and throw it 60 times a game. They're not going to go out there and run it 40 times a game. They're going to balance both. What excites me the most about this change, though, is being an offensive guy, I think inherently you have an advantage pre-snap. Just because you know where you're going, you know where the motions are going, you know when the snap count is.
It's very annoying as a defender trying to figure out where you guys are going to line up, all the verbiage you're using. Yes, it's bothersome.
But if the play clock winds down in sub 5 seconds, you guys can then make your adjustments on the defensive side of the ball. You can communicate, you can adapt. When in offense, when you get up in tempo and you're doing the check with me on the sidelines, all you're really saying is we're going to give ourselves the biggest pre-snap advantage possible. We're going to do as much as possible to make that defense uncomfortable. That's something we haven't seen from Wisconsin in the past decade of their, run downhill 22 personnel. I also heard they're shuffling 7 or 8 offensive linemen in now. You need to rotate guys because you're snapping the ball with 20-plus seconds on the play clock. So you're going to see a completely new offensive identity, and I think it's going to help them put up more points on the board. And I think the defense will remain as one of the top defenses, understanding Fickell's a defensive guy as well.
To go to something I referenced earlier where, we both went through coaching changes in college, and because Wisconsin had been such an established program and had a lot of representative success in winning the Big Ten West Division, going to Big Ten championship games, there was a level of surprise that went with the coaching change last year, even though, you could certainly sense it was maybe leading in that direction. But early during the season, now Luke Fickell comes in, and even though his resume is established, it speaks for itself. From your experience, how difficult can that be just to come in as the new guy with a program that had success, just like your program had success at Michigan before Jim Harbaugh came in? How difficult do you think the task is for Luke Fickell to just establish his culture when a culture had success that he took over?
Well, I think the way he handled it shows that his approach is going to work. Because he came in, he was part of their bowl prep, even though he wasn't the head coach. Yeah. And he did that just to familiarize himself with the roster. I think the biggest piece here, too, is how fluid Coach Fickell's been. When I was talking to him on the radio the other day, he mentioned, he comes in and he's watching the defense. And he runs a 3-3-5 at Cincinnati. We know Wisconsin runs a 3-4. He could come in and say, this is how I've always done it. We're going to run a 3-3-5. But he familiarized himself with the roster, with the scheme. He asked himself, why was Wisconsin so successful under Jim Leonhard? Okay, maybe I don't want to abandon all that. Let's find the best way to continue doing some of that 3-4. Let's implement some of the things that allowed him to have success at Cincinnati. And all he's doing is saying, let's take the big picture of what's done right at Wisconsin in recent years, and then let's implement some of the things that helped us have success at Cincinnati and other places he's been. So it's super fluid, and I think that's going to allow Wisconsin to be effectively in win-now mode come the fall.
And you reference how Luke Fickell, defensive guy, he ends up bringing in Mike Tressel. And there was some curiosity whether or not you would end up sticking with the previous defensive mastermind that's there or bring in his own guy. Mike Tressel shows up. It seems to me that maybe, just from a coordinator perspective, that may be one of the positions in the conference, perhaps in the country, where folks are most in tune with how Wisconsin's defense performs, because that side of the football and that coordinator position has been so successful, not only under Jim Leonhard, but several previous defensive coordinators. How do you view the task that Mike Tressel takes over?
Well, I think it'll be a joint thing between Coach Tressel and Coach Fickell. The good thing is they're starting with a solid foundation, like you said, because continually, how often have we seen Wisconsin top 5 in a number of different defensive categories as well as total defense? So they've had the success, they have the players in place, but now you can see them start to get creative with the guys they have on the roster, with what they've done in the transfer portal. It'll be a 3-4 if the offense wants to come out and run the ball on multiple tight end sets. But then they can get into the 3-3-5 if they're facing a spread offense. They can do some things in the nickel and dollar packages when it's third down. They want to get creative with their blitzes. So the good thing is these guys are successful coordinators, successful defensive minds, and they can add that to all the talent Wisconsin has had on their roster in the past.
Man, so much fluidity, so much change happening in Big Ten football. It's going to be a lot to stay tuned for this Saturday on the Big Ten Network. Looking forward to that. They're joined by Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and some of the other top programs in the country. This, of course, is in large part thanks to the work that PJ Fleck and his staff have done, which gets us to our big interview. The Minnesota Gophers head coach PJ Fleck now with me live here on set for Big Ten Today. And PJ, yet another spring game is going to be coming up here. We'll see that on the Big Ten Network on Saturday. But you guys had to make a transition. It'll be inside this season. You've dealt with that before, but how differently will it end up functioning for you versus what we might have seen outdoors?
A little college arena football here. This is going to be
there
good.
We go.
We've got a great scoreboard that's being renovated, about a $5-6 million project over there that we're getting a whole new scoreboard. Don't really have a lot of electronics inside Huntington Bank Stadium right now. Plus, it was 80 degrees last week, and then it's Minnesota weather this week. So I think going indoors keeps it good for everybody, for our players' families, and then obviously putting on a good show for everybody else. I think that's really important, especially in the spring. And I know our guys really want to play a game. So moving it indoors seems logical, and that's what we're going to do.
And in your seventh season that you're going into right now, you've been through, of course, a number of spring balls. I'm curious for you because you're still a young guy in age, but you've been a head coach for quite a while now. In what ways has the way you manage spring ball evolved over the years?
Well, I think every team is completely different. There's been times we've only practiced maybe 11 out of the 15 times, use the other time for more half-speed walkthroughs, a lot of individual time. But this has been, since day one, we've been going. And I think that's the thing. We're going to have 15 total practices, including the spring game. But we've practiced, and it's been really good for us. This is a pretty inexperienced team. You don't have on the offensive side Mohamed Ibrahim, Tanner Morgan and John Michael Schmitz that you had for 4 or 5 years, it seemed like every year. And then on the defensive side, you're replacing a lot of key starters as well with Mariano Sori-Marin going, to the NFL and Jordan Howden and all the guys on defense. So we really needed to just get out and play and practice. The NCAA allows you to have a lot of individual time here and there, even during winter conditioning. You get some in the summertime. So we needed to play football, and I think our team has handled that really well. We've definitely played football this spring and gotten a lot better.
It's kind of wild to think about the fact that you've been in Minnesota as long as you have, and this is in the midst of your first spring without Tanner Morgan somewhere in the QB meeting room, somewhere behind center for you. So now that you're towards the end of it, in what ways is his absence, how has that become most apparent?
Well, in reality, I've been a head coach now going on 11 years. I've really had 2 quarterbacks technically play for me. And where we've been at Western Michigan, Zach Terrell played, and then Tanner Morgan the majority of the time here at Minnesota. And now it's time to be able to elevate someone else and develop somebody. And, Cole Kramer's done a great job. Ethan Kaliakmanis has done a great job. Drew Viato has done a really good job this spring. So, that's the fun part about being able to take the next guy and be able to really pour into him and develop. And we know this, you're going to need, every position needs a pair and a spare and some air to put in that spare. And, Glenn Mason made that phrase, really famous. And, we're just going to have to continue to build depth. But I'm really happy with the quarterback position. And as of right now, Coach Harbaugh has done a really good job of bringing those guys along. And Cole Kramer's been here a lot. He's done a really good job in the Wildcat for us, but has also evolved a lot as a quarterback right now. And then Ethan Kaliakmanis got in there last year and won a bunch of games for us and won a bowl game and did a great job. So, that's what's going to be really exciting, as we get into this year. It's kind of a new era of Gopher football when you kind of start to see, with the transition at quarterback. And so far, so good.
Transition not only at quarterback, but you referenced your coordinators there, Greg Harbaugh Jr., co-offensive coordinator now with Matt Simon after Kirk Ciarrocca leaves to go on to Rutgers. In what ways will, first, who's going to call plays, PJ? Give me the goods.
Well, we're still working that out.
Okay.
We know what we're doing internally, but we'll keep that internally. Both guys have called plays, in the past. Matt Simon's done a really good job in bowl games for us, and because called plays in practice, anytime we've played it for the last probably 9 years being with me at certain times. So tons of confidence in him. Tons of confidence in Coach Harbaugh, too. Coach Harbaugh called plays at Western Michigan, did a bunch for us, even when he wasn't necessarily, a coordinator yet. So I like to develop guys on the staff, even in play at practices and scrimmages, even when they're not the coordinator, to get them the feeling of having that flow and having that experience. But we have faith in both of them. We have a plan internally, and we'll keep it that way. So I apologize for not being able to give you all the goods, but one of those two will end up calling it.
Yeah, I've kind of described Matt Simon as that backup QB who didn't enter the transfer portal. He's just been kind of waiting on his time here. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out, as I'm sure a lot of Gopher fans will as well. Defensively, you've spent a lot of time over the offseason here working to develop your pass rush with some personnel that's gone on to the NFL in recent years. How have you gone about trying to make that development happen?
Well, one, I think our defensive line coach has done a great job coming in here. Winston Delabo-Badir III played here for me from 2017 to 2019. I think he is one of the fast rising superstars in this profession, and you can already see the difference in our D-line, not only in their technique and their fundamentals, but how hard they practice. And we have high expectations of that already, let alone inject this electricity with Winston DeLabaviere, who played with incredible how and energy as a player. And he's the exact same way as a coach. He's only 25, 26 years old, but he's a fast rising superstar in the profession. But we brought in a lot of people in the offseason, a lot of NFL pass rush specialists to really just teach our staff how we can sequentially put together a lot of different things to make ourselves a better pass rush team. I think that has helped. And then thirdly, I think just the talent in that room. We're bigger, we're longer, we're stronger, we're quicker, we're faster, we're more aggressive than we've ever been here at the University of Minnesota in our 7 years. And that's a direct byproduct of our recruiting and our strength coach, Dan Nickel, and his development down there with our strength and conditioning program, and the players buy into it. We're probably deeper and like I said, bigger, stronger, more athletic than we've ever been since we've been here at the defensive line.
They had so many studs on that defense in recent years. Several of them on the back end, of course, have gone on to the NFL. Tyler Nubin is a player who had an opportunity to go to the NFL and would have been projected as an early draft pick. Were you surprised that he decided to return for another season?
Yes and no. Nothing surprises me anymore when you're dealing with 17 and 24-year-old young men in the transfer portal, NIL era. Nothing shocks you. But he did it for all the right reasons. Tyler Nubin is an incredibly confident individual. He's one of the best players at the University of Minnesota, and I think one of the best players in the country, because he's a guy like John Rahm talked about after winning the Masters. He played in the RBC because he just loved to play golf. Well, Tyler Nubin's the exact same way. He just loves to play football. It's rare that you have somebody in this day and age have so much fun playing that game all the time, whether it's practice, whether it's the weight room, whether it's meetings, whether it's a scrimmage, whether it's 7-on-7 or team or inside drill. He is always smiling. And the last one I had like that was Antoine Winfield Jr. And obviously he's gone on to have a great career in the National Football League. So Tyler Nubin has the world in the palm of his hand. He worked so hard, but he made the decisions for all the right reasons. The number one was the team. He didn't want to stop playing college football yet. He feels like there's so much more to accomplish here. And then two, he wanted to maximize the ability. Tyler Nubin doesn't think in the space of I just want to make it to the NFL. He's a type of young man that thinks I'm going to be an all-pro in the NFL, right? He thinks way bigger than that. It's not about, I just want to get drafted. I want to be one of the top picks in the NFL draft. And be careful what you always wish for, because you're probably going to get it. You just have to be really smart at how you go about doing that. And I think Tyler made all the right decisions for all the right reasons. And he's got unbelievable parents, Sharice Nubin and Rodney Nubin, who are on one of the Big Ten boards for parents that Kevin Warren handpicked. And he couldn't have a better circle around him. And I'm just really, really proud of him.
Daniel Fa'alele last year ended a drought that the program had of offensive linemen not getting drafted into the National Football League. One of my favorite centers, John Michael Schmidt, he is going to go even higher, it seems, than Fa'alele did last year. Pins and needles for you next weekend as you look to see where John Michael, where Mo Ibrahim, where some of these other guys end up going in the NFL?
Well, it's so exciting for these young people having a chance to have their dream come true. And that's what coaches do, right? I mean, you take a kid, he was committed to us at Western Michigan University, followed us here to the University of Minnesota, sight unseen, two-star-ish type player, and was truly a developmental player, and came here, and Coach Callahan did a great job of developing him along with Coach Shiraka and our offensive staff. And you talk about another guy who just loves playing the game. I'd be shocked if he gets out of the first round. I don't think he will. I really think he's a really special talent that's going to play a lot of years. And there's a lot of teams in the draft that need a center. And if they do, he's a no-brainer. He's smart. He's tough. He's from the south side of Chicago. Again, got incredible parents who put hard work at the forefront of everything that he does and make him earn everything he has. I've got a lot of stories about his mom, having meetings with her even through his time here. And all she wanted to hear was how hard he was working. I don't care what he's doing, the success he's having, is he working hard or not? And comes from a very blue-collar family. So I don't think he'll get out of the first round, but we're having historic draft success too. And hopefully we got 4 or 5 guys that'll be drafted this year as well. And add to that over the last 4 years. I mean, those are record-breaking years. So just a credit to our entire program and the people who are in it and the players who really buy into it and believe and make their life better every day.
Well, those historic results for Gopher football on the field and off have no doubt been elite. Really appreciate your time, PJ.
I appreciate you. Row the boat, Sky Ma. Go Gophers. See you soon.
There are 6 Big Ten teams on the field for either their spring games or their final spring practices this weekend. Illinois spring game was moved from tonight to tomorrow due to weather. Then Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Purdue will suit up on Saturday. We already discussed the Gophers, Huskers, and Badgers squads available for your viewing pleasure on the Big Ten Network this Saturday. But now let's dive into the other three teams in action this weekend. We'll start with the Fighting Illini, who will be on the field tomorrow night. And then they made an adjustment. Their fans will still be out there at Memorial Stadium to check it out in person. For Brett Bielema, you do have continuity at offensive coordinator. Barry Lenny Jr. returns. And really one of the pleasant surprises in the Big Ten Conference was quarterback Tommy DeVito last year. It's hard to predict, I think, a guy who would ascend like that in his first year at a program. So what do you think the challenge will be this season for Barry Lenny Jr. trying to break in another new quarterback?
The challenge really to me is they laid a great foundation last year. The challenge as a team, not just offensively, is can you now build off of that? Can you see if you can raise the ceiling a little bit more this year? So you mentioned the quarterback went back to the transfer portal and you went and got Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss. I know they're really high on him. There's a lot of buzz around the program, and I'm really high on Barry Lenny Jr. as a coach that he's going to be able to scheme this. The other piece is Chase Brown's gone. Yeah. And, I mean, there was games I called last year. He was getting 45 touches in a game. So how do you replace that? Josh McCray, Reggie Love need to step up. But I think what we might see this year is a more pass-friendly offense because they return all their guys, Isaiah Williams, Pat Bryant, Casey Washington, guys that I thought were really solid last year, but they had to take a back seat to giving the ball to Chase Brown. You might see Illinois lean more towards the RPO and quick game to supplement the lesser carries given it to Chase Brown.
Let's transition to Iowa City. And I'm curious for your thoughts here because I get some odd looks from some of the Hawkeye fans when I kind of give my description of what I think the Iowa offense was last year, specifically Brian Ferentz, their offensive coordinator. I didn't have as much concern for the play calling of Brian Ferentz as I was curious about and will continue to be curious about the quarterback development moving forward. I think it is two different things, because for him, he's not only the play caller, he is the QB coach. Do you think that kind of sounds crazy? Because I think a lot of the focus went on the plays he called. I'm wondering, Iowa needs to make sure they are actually developing the quarterback position well, and at least you have a veteran coming in now in Cade McNamara.
Yeah, and that they'll benefit from that with Cade. To me, it was even another layer below that because when I just think Iowa has a certain identity when they succeed. And it was behind typically we think Iowa, we think offensive linemen.
Yeah.
We think run the ball downhill. We think a clean pocket. It's been 2 years in a row now where they haven't had a dominant offensive line. That's being generous. But now they're a year older, a year wiser. I think that offensive line steps up and takes another step this year. Cade McNamara, you don't need to develop him. He was developed at Michigan. He won a Big Ten championship there. He was a starting quarterback in the college football playoff. And then you got two great tight ends. You got Luke Lachey, who really came on strong last year, and then you have Eric All coming from Michigan. So the identity of whom Iowa wants to be, they have the pieces in place, and a sophomore running back in Caleb Johnson who's looking to take that second-year leap as well. So I don't know how great their offense will be, but I expect them to be much better than they were last year.
How big of a difference does the fact that Cade McNamara is so experienced, has won a championship? It sounds like he's come in and immediately taken this leadership role. It feels like that shouldn't be so easy for a quarterback, but it sounds like he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked on one end earlier in the show about Nebraska, how the competition will benefit them. I think in Iowa, they can finally just exhale a little bit and say, all right, we know who our starting guy is going to be. He's proven. He's done it at Michigan. Loves throwing to his tight ends. He's got two great tight ends. So I think it's nice to have stability. It's nice to have a leader at that position just to say, hey, guys, offensively, we know who we want to be, and we know who our pieces are as well, so they can start to work that throughout the spring, summer, and into fall camp.
We'll see how they continue to maybe try to supplement things in the transfer portal moving forward to compile some more playmakers there. A lot of folks are curious about Purdue and what it would look like under Ryan Walters' leadership coming over from Illinois as a very successful defensive coordinator with Brett Bielema. And how would the Purdue offense end up working? What would they end up doing schematically on that end of the ball with a defensive-minded head coach? A lot of folks, a lot of Boilermaker fans, very pleasantly surprised. You hire Graham Harrell, who had become already one of the top offensive minds in the sport, bringing his version of the air raid approach with him to West Lofton. So what do you think? Will it kind of look like what we've seen Purdue looking like in recent years offensively?
I hope so, because I think the way Purdue and Jeff Brom called plays allowed them to win. The Spoilermakers, right?
Yeah.
You don't do that just by lining up and going toe-to-toe with Ohio State. You do it by having some creative play calling and finding ways to give yourself a pre-snap schematic advantage. Now, there's going to be challenges ahead because O'Connell's gone to the NFL. Charlie Jones is gone. Payne Durham, the tight end, is gone. Those are your three biggest pieces last year on offense. So this offense is going to look different schematically as well as the personnel. That being said, defense was an issue at times for Purdue last year. The one thing I'm betting on is that Ryan Walters is going to get this defense up to speed and have them playing much better football. He's just that kind of guy. I'm just excited to see Ryan Walters, not just this year. I don't think it's going to be perfect this year. But going forward, he was one of the best coaches I was around last year and had the chance to talk to. I really think he's going to be a successful head coach.
And the Big Ten West, just in general, it's still a deep and talented division. Do you see Purdue as a program? You use the term spoiler makers for what they've done last year, made the Big Ten championship game. Is that a bit too lofty to think that perhaps they can continue to be a true competitor within the West?
I think the West is everybody's tight knit right now. Who do you going into this year? Who would you say is the favorite? I mean, you can make a case for a lot of guys, so that allows you a window of opportunity if you're Purdue to say, let's seize the moment, let's get some forward momentum, and start to have our name in that conversation with Wisconsin and Iowa, who are the traditional West teams that make it to Indianapolis.
Yeah, there's so much in that Big Ten West division that feels like it's unknown, perhaps unsettled to a certain extent, but that's a part of what can make a division so great and so entertaining as it's been the last few seasons. We know you're going to cover it as well as anyone, Jake. Always great sitting down with you to talk some football. Welcome back to Big Ten Today. All 14 softball teams will be in action this weekend in conference play. That starts tomorrow night. Some major matchups include Indiana, who will be facing Rutgers, a clash between Northwestern and Michigan, and also Wisconsin taking on Nebraska. So to help me break all of that down in great detail is the great Sammy Netling herself. And let's start off with the matchup. Two of the top 5 teams in the Big Ten will be going at it. High-powered Huskers bats versus one of the deepest bullpens in the Big Ten. What do you think is going to be one of the keys in this matchup?
I'm excited for the chess match we're going to see, but between this hitter-pitcher matchup that we have. I think we'll start with Nebraska. The biggest thing for them, I think, is actually in the circle, right? That they rely very heavily on their ace, Courtney Wallace. How is Harness, the transfer, going to do? Is she going to be able to take some innings for them so that they can really let their offense do what their offense does best against what you said, a very deep Badger bullpen?
And Sarah Harness coming in as a transfer. I'm just wondering, is there much in softball, because it feels like so much of it is about community as much as anything, is about that team vibe, with as much as you guys spend full weekends, taking road trips, spending multiple games. For Harness coming in as a transfer and having the immediate success she seems to have had, is that sort of out of the norm?
I don't think so. I think she was a big-time pitcher at the D3 level, and so again, it's just about how can this coaching staff put her in situations to be successful, right? And they challenged this team very early on. They had a very tough non-conference schedule, and so now moving into conference play, right? They are blessed to be able to rely very heavily on their fifth-year ace, Courtney Wallace. But I think for Harness, it's just can we settle the nerves a little bit? Can she has streaks of brilliance, Coach Revelle says, because she really can be lights out at times, and we've seen her really turn it on as of late. She has 3 wins in her past 3 appearances. So how can she impact this team this weekend in terms of trying to limit the amount of damage that this Badger offense can do?
Moving on to one of the other key matchups, a couple of the top programs in the entire country at this point, between Northwestern, who you know well, of course, and Michigan will be doing battle. What stands out to you about that series?
This is a classic perennial power matchup, and I'm really excited. You have the kind of the new wave of the Northwestern dominance we've seen in the past couple of years against one of the conference's best and most difficult places to play in Ann Arbor. So I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a battle of the changeups, specifically in Game 1. I have to imagine we're going to see a Danielle Williams versus Lauren Durkowski in the circle for these two teams. And so for me, it's really about what is the game plan there offensively? Are we going to zone the changeup? Are we going to go after it early in the count? Are we going to lay off it until we have 2 strikes? It's again going to be another chess match for these two coaching staffs.
What do you think has been one of the keys for Northwestern in kind of beginning to surge in the way that they have here?
I think there's a lot of different factors that goes into it, right? That they are so deep, so experienced. We talk about their fifth years. They have 5 of them. They return 8 offensive starters, and really 1 through 9, they are very, very tough offensively right now. Seem to really have turned it on to another level in conference play. But for me, it is the depth that they now have in their bullpen, and it just gives them an added layer, and you can just see that the confidence that this team has to really compete in any situation, no matter what the scoreboard says, they know how to win.
And you've worked with pitching staffs a lot, obviously, in your past. Looking forward to talking about that in a bit more detail a little later in the show as well. For Michigan's offense, what do you think will be key for them in trying to figure out how do they get something going, keep something sustained perhaps against Northwestern?
Yeah, I think Coach Thole talks a lot about this idea of they're one more away, right? They're one more timely hit with runners in scoring position away, one more, hard lead off of second base so we can score on a ground ball up the middle away, one more big out from our pitching staffs away. And I think they've solved that on the pitching side of things. I mean, Jerkowski has been lights out for them the past couple of weekends. So again, can they have the confidence in big time situations, in clutch RBI producing situations to be able to push those runs across?
Well, another big series is going to be taking place this weekend is Indiana at Rutgers. Fortunately for the Hoosiers, they have one of the best players in the country in Taryn Kern. She was named one of the 25 finalists for Player of the Year just yesterday. She's the only Big Ten player on the list and only one of true freshmen. She has been unbelievable, Sammy. How has she been able to thrive at such a young age?
She's just so poised in really both sides of the game. I mean, we talk about the video game numbers that she's putting up offensively, tied for the lead in the nation right now in home runs. In the conference, she leads in 7 total offensive categories, but she has so much athleticism, so much versatility. She has great range defensively, and she just has a really, really high softball IQ.
When you see someone come in and light it up, I mean, it's probably pretty rare, but when someone lights it up as early as they have, and you reference the type of athlete that she is, does this mean that the development arc could even continue to ascend throughout her career?
I do, and I think it's about how does she combat when opponents now have a lot more film on her, right? It's a lot easy to scout a sophomore than it is to scout a freshman. But I think she's someone who really embraces just the process that it takes to compete at an elite level in Division I softball. She's been a huge just momentum shift for this offense. We talk about how dynamic they now are, really 1 through 9. In my opinion, even more so than Nebraska and Northwestern, who are at the top in all of the offensive categories in the Big Ten. But this Indiana Hoosiers team is so versatile in the way that they're able to manufacture runs. They can play small ball really well. They have gap-to-gap power. They can drive the long ball 1 through 9. And so I'm really excited to see this matchup with Rutgers this weekend, who is another offense that almost feels like they're looking in the mirror a little bit. That these are 2 programs that have 200 stolen base attempts on the year so far between the 2 of them. They are relentless on the base pass. They take advantage of every extra 60 feet that they can. So this matchup in particular for me is going to be all about clean defense. Who can play clean D, who can limit the extra 60 feet. And for 2 programs that are really looking to get back in the Big Ten win column, this is a great weekend to do it.
What's taken a step back for Indiana, if I can use that term, because they were so hot for so long and things, haven't gone quite as well for them as of late? Is it just about the competition they began to face within their schedule?
I think it's more so just how do we get the momentum back after the adrenaline and the high of the 23-game win streak is over, right? I think it's just getting back to doing what they do best. Again, clean D, have solid pitching, and really just rely on their offense through and through.
And if they do that, then we'll see maybe another successful series on the way for the Hoosiers. We're back on Big Ten today. You're looking at the Big Ten softball standings. Northwestern has a full 3-game lead over the rest of the conference as they're in the midst of an 8-game winning streak. Everything has to be clicking for that kind of success. And we're joined by Sammy Netling again. Sammy, I'm curious, as you evaluate Northwestern's pitching, what is it about any adjustments that perhaps they've made there that have allowed them to cruise in the way they've begun to cruise?
Yeah, I think it's the phrase we've heard is they've been strategic with Daniel Williams' innings this year, right? Last year, if you would go into a Big Ten conference series and you had 21 innings in a weekend, you would probably see Daniel Williams for 15 of those 21 innings. And so I think because they've been strategic with that, because we haven't seen her have the innings count that we've seen her have previously, it's been a real gift to the other arms in this bullpen. You talk about just them with another transfer themselves in Cammie Henry. Boyd has really come on, and even Sydney Supley. So now for opponents, when they go to scout Northwestern, and you're going to have a different starting pitcher in every single game, you talk about the added layer of complexity and an added challenge now to try to strategize about how you're going to attack this pitching staff. I think it's just been a huge advantage to them, and it's really leveled up their success we've seen them have this year.
Pretty impressive to see how Kate Drohan can plan for success in the regular season and the postseason. Very successful show we've had today, thanks to Sammy Netling, to Jake Butt, and to PJ Fleck. More tomorrow.